Hello, everyone. I'm Daz, and welcome to American Civil War and UK History podcast. This presentation is available as a video on our YouTube channel and as a podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. Remember, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And joining me today is my good friend, Chris Mackowski. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, welcome. Glad to be here.
And so recently, Chris spent some time here in England. And so he was invited to speak at the American Civil War Roundtable UK Spring Conference. Chris arrived 3 days before the conference, which gave us the opportunity to visit some very cool places in England. So we had quite a good start the first morning. Your plane, you was out the airport pretty quick. Sorry, we literally got down to where I live in Kent here fairly quickly, and we started off, the Royal Military Canal. And so I just want to get your view, Chris, on what it was like seeing some of this stuff for the first time.
Right. I'd never been to England before, and I turned 54 next month and have never made it over there. So this was, in many ways, a lifelong dream to be able to get over there and finally see some of these iconic sites that I've known about my whole life, I've read about, I've seen, and I've always wanted the chance, but have never really had the opportunity. So it was really, in that respect, the dream come true. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but I had a couple bucket list items that I've wanted to check off and was able to do that. So that was especially meaningful. And so it was a whirlwind, tried to cram as much stuff in as I could. And I had very specific things I wanted to see since it was my first trip and limited time. And you were a fantastic host and kind enough to shepherd me around to see all these things I'd been waiting my whole life to see.
Yeah, cool. And of course, so one of the highlights for me was the first we went and visited Cape Hall-le-Fern, the Battle of Britain Memorial site. And of course, that's where you got to see the White Cliffs. And
Right,
so
right.
I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and visiting that site and what you thought of that site.
Yeah, it was, and maybe, the first day was probably emblematic of the whole trip in that we had so many different layers of history.
Mhm.
And, they all live on top of each other and around each other. And that was one of the things I really appreciated about your landscape there. I mean, I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, so we've got a lot of colonial era history, and George Washington specifically. We've got a lot of Civil War stuff. And I'm always intrigued by that kind of juxtaposition. But, you and I went to Dover Castle, and
Yeah,
think about how old William the Conqueror is, and you can go back to the Romans over there before
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and then there's World War II stuff, and so and it's all just kind of intertwined. So that was utterly fascinating to me. And then to see kind of like this geological history, which then of course is, tens of thousands, millions of years old, with the White Cliffs. And so it was stunning, and you can see pictures of the White Cliffs and hear about the White Cliffs, but to stand there and see them and marvel at really what an incredible geological feature they are. It was awe-inspiring. I say awesome and not in the
Yeah.
that was awesome, dude, but like as in inspiring awe. Uh, so
Yeah, I get where you come from. And again, I'm so pleased that I got to take you to the places I got to take you the first morning because I was worried about the time constraints. And again, you getting out early from the airport was great, because I got to take you to three of the places I definitely wanted to take you. And again, Dover is my absolute 100% favourite place on this earth. And like you said, so many layers of history. And, I will keep going down there, you know. But yeah, it's such a great place, and so I'm glad I got to show you that because you made a comment to me on a podcast we did a little while back about being coming on my stomping ground, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you down to Kent, to see the White Cliffs and Dover and all that. So yeah, but the second day we went into London, didn't we? And we did a lot that day, didn't we? We did a lot of walking, we did a lot of joking around, we had a few beers as well. We had the best sausage roll I've ever tasted.
oh yeah.
So what was your impressions when you first walked out of Tower Hill and you saw the Tower of London, and you got the vibe of London, you saw the London Tower Bridge and things like that?
Well, and even the tube itself is iconic,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
of course.
coming up out of the tube station, like boom, there it is, the Tower of London, and it's like holy Mackinac. And the Tower Bridge, which for me is probably my favorite of the many iconic structures in London, and that dates back to an old monster movie I used to love called Gorgo when I was a kid, and the giant monster comes up the Thames and he destroys the bridge, and I love that. And so I've always just had a special affinity for Tower Bridge as a result of that. But then, we stood on a corner where there had been a number of
That's
executions
it.
over
Yeah.
the course of centuries.
Mhm.
And again, those layers of history I talked about, and you kind of see those inscribed in the monuments that are there. And from there, we walked down to the memorial for the Great Fire, and just thinking about the relationship of Christopher Wren, and we saw his footprints all over the city as we walked around, and the implications of what happened as a result of that fire, and how London had to rebuild itself and reinvent itself afterwards. And we went down along the Thames and talked a little bit about the Great Stink, which is something I
Yeah.
didn't know about.
Yeah.
But again, thinking about the modern marvel of engineering, and what that did for the septic system, and how that again reinvented London and changed things dramatically.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm a bit ashamed of myself really because I've only just started visiting London in the last few years and properly start like, delving into the history. So I'll just point out, ladies and gentlemen, some of this stuff was my first time as well, although the first part of London wasn't. But like, we'll get onto one in a minute, which is obviously Westminster Abbey. Now, I'd never been inside Westminster Abbey. I don't know why. I just hadn't. I mean, it's ridiculous to live down the road, technically, don't I? But wow, was that amazing? Was that amazing? It was a bit over. I think it was a bit for me, and you'll probably, I think you might agree with me, overwhelming in a way when I walked into there.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that for you?
And I wasn't sure what to expect, really. One of my bucket list items was to visit the graves of the poets in Westminster, so that's why I wanted to go. And of course, Westminster Abbey is one of those iconic spots. So we actually took an Uber boat up from the Tower of London so that we could see a lot of London from the river, and then we got off there right by House of Parliament, Big Ben, which I feel obligated to make a reference to the movie European Vacation, where they get caught in the traffic
Yeah,
circle. And Chevy Chase keeps saying, "Look, kids, House of Parliament,
yeah, I
Big
love
Ben."
that.
Yeah. But then walking across to Parliament Square and the different statues of the different personalities, just these titans of world history, and then to go into Westminster, where you have statuary that is so old, and to a lot of people, who are anonymous to us today, but were obviously important enough in their day to get these huge memorials in Westminster, and the church was just full of them. I mean, it was brimming, and like you said, it was just it was a bit much,
It
just
was
a
too
lot to
much. Yeah.
process. And I also felt like it was one of those like Where's Waldo things, because as we're looking around, like, oh wait, hey look, there's Sir Isaac Newton. Oh look, there's Stephen Hawking. There's Charles
Mhm.
Darwin, Winston
I
Churchill.
know there's everybody and anyone. Yeah.
I know, and it's a who's who, and because of the way they're all arranged, and a lot of people that I didn't know, but then suddenly someone would jump up, and it wouldn't just be someone I know, but like, look, Charles Darwin, like talk about a titan of modern intellectual life, right? And so it was so fun to suddenly just come upon these people. And I'll tell a little story on you, because one of the things I was like, oh, Sir David Livingston, Dr. Livingston, I presume. And you say, I'm waiting for someone famous. I was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean famous? And he's like, I want royalty. And I
Yeah.
turn around, and then that's where I see Isaac Newton. And I'm like, what? Like Isaac Newton, that's not famous enough for you? Like, you wrote the laws of physics for us? That's not famous? You're like, I want royalties. I'm looking for some kings.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny. I've retold that story a few times to my friends as well. I thought that was really fun. Yeah, I think the first king I came across was oh, I can't remember now. It was one of the I think it was actually Edward the Confessor. Actually, to be honest with you, that's when I
Yeah, that's
said,
right.
"Oh,
'Cause
someone famous."
yeah,
Yeah,
he had that. But it was neat, because when we were at that very spot where the scientists were, we did see a team of restorationists who were getting ready for the upcoming
Mhm.
coronation, and they
Yeah.
were working at just making
Oh
sure
wow, yeah.
everything was all clean and tidy. And it was neat to see that restoration work in progress as they're getting ready for this
And
generational event.
there was an awkward moment when you was trying to take a picture, and I had to duck out of the way. I don't know if you remember that. Go left, go
I was
left.
I was doing one of those panos, and so I'm like doing
Right.
this thing, and suddenly there's Daz, and he's like, "Whoa!" And,
Yeah. But honestly, that was crazy. But obviously, the best thing for me was the hidden highlights tour with the tour guide Howard was absolutely amazing. I think me and you were the only ones that actually laughed at his jokes. I don't know what everyone else was on that day, but we found him funny. We
oh,
literally
he was
laughed at everything the guy said, didn't we?
he
Um,
was
he
great.
was so great, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A wonderful tour guide, and I tell you what, that was the best 15 pounds I spent in England was doing the hidden highlights because we got to go into the room where the King James Bible was written,
Oh wow,
and
yeah.
over here there was a what was it, Richard II who died in the fireplace, and I
Yeah,
mean
the
it just
Jerusalem room, I believe it's called.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
we got to see the Order of Service as well, which Elizabeth's funeral was in. He said, "Don't take a picture of that." He said, "You
yeah,
can look at it, but don't take a picture of it." And
yeah.
there was
An original Thomas Crapper toilet in the
That's
Dean's
the
room.
one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was actually showing someone that the other day. Actually, yeah, when I was visiting London the other day, I showed someone that, and they did laugh when they saw that. But that was fantastic as well. Yeah, and there was
and
also a chair where all the dignitaries would sit. And I found that fascinating as well. But it was such a great place, and I'll just say, ladies and gentlemen, please go and visit Westminster Abbey if you
and
ever
we
get the chance.
we got a chance to see some of the archaeology they're doing because they're getting ready to do a visitor center,
Oh yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah.
they had dug up this place and found all of these bones, and apparently they're hypothesizing that they were plague victims who they had lived in the abbey, and when they died of plague, they buried them in this big pit outside. But there were also two Roman sarcophagi that were found there, and so you've got again all these layers of history, and they're trying to figure out what to do because now it's not a construction site; it's a burial ground, and that changes the game. And so figuring out how to do that while still get their visitor center is it was neat to hear them kind of talk through some of those challenges.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that was again, amazing to see that. That wasn't actually what I was expecting. I didn't expect that part on the tour, so that was an extra little bonus there. Um, yeah, and then sort of like we had to sort of collect ourselves after that because that really sapped us of energy, didn't it? Westminster Abbey, and we sort of took our way up to something that you wanted to do that you highlighted obviously before you came over, and you wanted to visit Benjamin Franklin's house, which he rented a room in. And again, it blew me away, that place, with the Georgian character and stuff like that. So what was that like for you as well, getting to visit that site?
It was really neat because a lot of people think of Ben Franklin as one of the founding fathers here in America, forgetting that he was all in for the British right up until like 1774, because he had served as a U.S. agent over there. And it's only because he was humiliated by George III at a meeting that he really kind of soured on the British and decided to change his allegiance. And so he came back to America and, becomes one of the central figures in the founding. So to see how he lived and where he lived, to go through those rooms and just kind of get a feel for early Franklin was pretty neat.
Hmm. And again, just round the corner from there, ladies and gentlemen, was the best sausage roll I've ever eaten.
Yeah, yeah. And
Wow.
across the street, they just found some evidence that
That's
John
right. Yep.
Quincy Adams had his office right across from where Franklin lived. So that was kind of neat to hear about that discovery. And we walked most of this too. We had a couple small tube stops that we jumped, but like the chance to walk this and walk around Trafalgar Square, and it was a neat way to discover London for the first time. So I had such a great. And I think we put on like 26,000 steps walking
Oh,
around.
we did. Yeah, we
I
did something like
wondered,
that. I checked it out on Google Maps, and we'd walked quite a few miles.
you know,
Yeah, and travelled quite a few miles. I think I did work it out. But also, again, we visited the plaque where John Adams lived as well in Gouverneur Square or Governor Square, whatever you want to call it. That was pretty cool. Again, like that was that sort of journey of walking, of getting a tube. We saw Buckingham Palace along the way, and that was pretty cool, wasn't it? But one of the things that really, and it's hard to choose something out of that day because it was all good. But for me, it was actually going into St Paul's Cathedral, listening to a choir sing, and I literally could not take my eyes off the inside of the dome because
yeah.
I was just transfixed by it.
Yeah. And particularly after Westminster, which was just so crammed full, and dim lighting and magnificent. Then going to St. Paul's, which was light and airy and magisterial, and it was a building built for acoustic. So to hear that evensong service with the choir, I mean, it just filled up the space so perfectly. And you're right, it was just an elegant way to end the day. And a really interesting juxtaposition against Westminster, which was magisterial in its own way. But St. Paul's was just
Oh,
stunning,
amazing!
just
Yeah,
gorgeous. So
again,
yeah,
just beautiful to look at from the outside as well, people.
yeah,
So go
yeah.
and
And then we had the chance to explore some nooks and crannies,
oh,
as
that
Ken
was
and I
one of my
called
favourite parts of the whole day. So as we walked from St Paul's down to Tower Hill, which is not far, we stopped at a few. Well, I think we stopped at one bar actually, didn't we? But it was great beer, it was great
it.
food, but along the way we had a real good laugh, didn't we?
Yeah. So every side street or alley, they'd be like, that'd be a nook, that'd be a cranny, and we'd be
That's
looking
it.
for pubs. And so it was sort of our own little unofficial pub crawl, getting back to
Yeah.
the tower. And we found a great little neighborhood pub, had some beers, and then we found a micro brew that was fantastic.
Oh wow, yeah.
Probably my favorite meal of the whole place was at that brewery, and it was community owned and employee had um, profit sharing, so it was kind of a really neat business model too. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And and again, I mean, the point of that journey was actually because we needed to charge our phones because we had taken so many pictures. Like we was literally on 15% each. And of
yeah.
course, you had to buy yourself a wire, didn't you? And literally, the only reason we went into one of the bars is because it had a plug socket. So we
It's
didn't
funny because
technically go in there for beer, did we, Chris? We went in there to charge our phones.
and charge ourselves, right?
But we had a beer too. But
So it was funny because when I left in the morning, I was like, "Should I bring my charger?" Nah, I won't need my charger. I can get through the day. So no, we took so many photos. It was
and,
great, and
and
we
guess
shot some
what? You
videos and stuff. So it was good.
you left that in my car, that charger.
Oh, did I? Okay. Well, look, my compliments.
My wife has now got an iPhone charger.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you very much. But anyway, yeah, that was cool. And so that finished that day. And, the next day for you was a real, you know, bucket list item because we went to a place known as Stratford upon Avon. And for people that don't know that, that is where William Shakespeare is born. And we went
Mhm.
to his birthplace. And we both got something different out of that. I think obviously you got the fact that you wanted to tick a bucket list item off. I'd always wanted to go there anyway, obviously, like I said to you, but I preferred like the social aspect of things and the house itself I appreciated more than probably maybe the William Shakespeare connection. But so tell us about that special day for you.
Yeah, that was the other bucket list item I had is I wanted to go to walk in Shakespeare's footsteps. And so we got to go to the house he was born in. We stood in the room where he was born, and then we got to go at the end of the day to where he was buried. So we got to kind of do the whole Shakespearean life cycle there. And I mean, I knew it would be meaningful to me and it would be exciting. But as I was standing there in front of his grave, I had a moment. I got all choked up, I'll admit it. And I mean, it was a pretty overwhelming experience for me in the best sorts of ways.
Mhm.
And, Shakespeare is a writer who I've appreciated for decades, ever since I was a freshman in college and had to actually perform Shakespeare. I'd read Shakespeare in high school, and like most high schoolers, I was like, I can hardly make sense of this. When I had to perform Shakespeare and I learned how to speak it, and it was like finding the Rosetta Stone, because then I could suddenly, oh, now I get what he's talking about. And that really opened a lifelong appreciation of Shakespeare for me. And I've had the chance to be in 4 different Shakespeare productions. I've directed one. Of course, I've read them all and studied them in grad school and stuff. And so to be able to go there was just something that was exceptionally meaningful to me.
Yeah, and again, Stratford is such a beautiful place.
Yeah, and the Tudor architecture all through town was neat, and it was a town built for tourism, and they
Yeah,
keep it spick and span clean, don't they?
it's also a place where you definitely need to take your wife out for a meal or somewhere like that as well. It's got that sort of vibe to it, but also there's little things along the way that you know like there was a lamppost, wasn't there, with something on to do with Shakespeare, so there's nods to Shakespeare here, there, and everywhere, which there would be, pubs named after him, this, that, and the other. But it's just such a beautiful place. It really is. And I remember losing you in the shop for about, I think, probably an hour, I think it was, which I didn't mind. But I thought, where's he gone? Like one minute I saw you, the next minute you were gone. And like it was like you disappeared down a hole somewhere. I don't know where you went.
I wanted to have just the right mementos from Shakespeare's birthplace to take home with me.
Yeah.
as opposed to, there are tchotchke shops across the street where you can buy all kinds of knickknacks and trinkets. But I really wanted something meaningful from the birthplace to help support the birthplace, and also just to,
Yeah.
it came from Shakespeare's home.
And again, that's got its own history as well because it was saved by, people within that field as well, wasn't it? That's what they tell. Well, if you know your history of that place, so that is also cool. So yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'm glad you got to experience that.
I was just going to say, an extremely well interpreted site. They had a great visitor center, a little museum attached to it with, I thought, some excellent displays and exhibits and interpretation. The guides were really friendly and good with questions. So, like you said, the kind of the personal aspect and the historic history aspect of it was really neat.
Yeah, cool. And there was this one other moment in the church where I didn't realise she was having a moment. And anyway, I was speaking to this lady, and I said, "Yeah, my friend's from America, and this is like a bucket list." And she went, "Oh, I need to tell him something. I need to tell him something." And I went, "Well, he's over there." And because she was sitting there, I didn't realise she was having a moment, and we unfortunately disturbed you. And but it was good because she wanted to tell you something. I don't know if you remember that, but there was like some book or something she wanted to tell you about, and that was quite a special moment.
The chained Bible, yeah,
That's
which
it.
was
Yeah.
very
hmm
cool.
But
So
yeah, she was dying to talk to you. But yeah, that was fantastic, and I'm glad you got to do that. So and then as we finished the day at Tolkien's, we went to J.R.R. Tolkien's grave in Oxford, which
a
again,
writer who's had a big impact on both of us.
exactly, yeah, and in different aspects. So I'll explain. Chris obviously read the books when he was younger, and that's how he became familiar with Tolkien. But for me, it was the films. So it was the reverse. And then obviously, what followed was audio books and the radio show and stuff like that. But it meant a lot to me because those films mean a lot to me. I can't
Yeah.
explain it. It's just strange. But yeah, it was a great moment for me.
Yeah, I first read Fellowship of the Ring like in a day and a half straight, and my father owned a greenhouse, and so I sat on the top rung of a ladder up against the one part of the greenhouse, and it was hot, but it was early in the season, so it wasn't like blazing hot. And I sat up there and I read, and I had a thing of water with me so that I didn't dehydrate in the greenhouse, and I all the way through. I mean, I couldn't stop. It was such a powerful book and an overwhelming reading experience. It was fantastic, and I probably read those books, once every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, cool. And I can remember you telling me about going to watch the movies quite a few times as well, didn't you, with
Yeah,
your daughter? Yeah, so you know, great, great stuff. Of course, having a pint in that pub as well. The I think it was the Lamb and the Flag, was it? Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
and there are two pubs right across the street from each other in Oxford. And one of them is closed and being remodeled and soon to be
yeah.
open, the sign says. So we didn't go in that one, but we did go in the other one. And they had a picture of Tolkien and his wife in the corner, and it was pretty cool. So he used to
Yeah.
meet there with C.S. Lewis and a group of other literary friends that called themselves the Inklings, and they would swap ideas and stories. And really, that's kind of how Lewis and Tolkien, in particular, sort of challenged each other to develop their stories and had this great intellectual collaboration.
And I'm just going to point out, just before we left that evening, Chris said to me, "So we're staying at the bus stop. We've got 15 minutes. We could go in the pub and have a pint." And I've never known anyone drink a blooming pint so quickly. You just sort of, I don't know, you just, and I'm still stuck there with half a pint and a local like talking rubbish to me. And you're like, well, I'll go and hold the bus for you if it turns up. Thanks, mate.
And I bought his pint for him too.
You did, didn't you?
He
Yeah.
was entertaining,
And,
but
and so I had to down my pint and it was really gassy. So thanks for that, mate. But anyway, we got there in the end. But that was fantastic. And so anyway, the next morning, obviously, you quickly visited Trinity. Was it Trinity College? Is that
in
right?
college.
Yeah, of course, that's affiliated with your college, isn't it? So
My university, St. Bonaventure, has a summer program there, and they always invite me to come over and hang out with them, and I just have never had the opportunity. So, since I was over there, I wanted to at least see what Trinity was like, and what a beautiful, beautiful campus that was. So, now it's like, ooh, now I really need to find an excuse to go over when I have the next chance
yeah, of
to.
course. Yeah, of course. Why not? I'll come and meet you. But anyway, so then we ended up at we sort of had to have like a bit of a timeout, didn't we? Because we sort of burnt ourselves out a little bit, and we had a really nice sort of like morning stroke afternoon at the hotel before the conference started, didn't we? So,
And it was nice and relaxing. We both got caught up on some work. One thing I want to kind of throw in though, the night before when we stayed at Oxford, we did Tolkien's Grave, and then we stayed at the hotel, and it was neat because there was a soccer match on or a football match that you wanted to watch, and football in England is a cultural phenomenon in a way that
Hmm.
just isn't here. So it was neat to kind of see everybody gathering around in the hotel lobby to watch the football match on TV, and you were really into it, and
And it
that
was painful to watch. Yeah.
that was cool to watch. It was really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. 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 That was cool. Yeah. And
And then the estate we stayed at for the conference,
oh wow. Yeah.
and we've been on highways the whole time. So we get off, we go through this little village, and then we're going on these paved cow paths. And Darren's like, "Yeah, this is what the English countrysides really looked like." And it was like quaint and everything you'd kind of imagine out of it, like a James Herriot book or something like that, and it was just beautiful. And then we get to this little village, and there's a monument to the Boer War in the town square, which was really neat, kind of an aspect of history that we'd sort of danced around but hadn't really seen something for. So it was neat to see that monument. And then the estate itself, I said to people it was like living in a Agatha Christie novel for the weekend because it just looks like this big old country mansion, and either I'm going to be murdered or I'll be murdered. One of the two.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Well, I referred it to looking like Toad Hall, but you know,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
did look very similar, didn't it? It was a
Uh,
beautiful place, but
yeah.
again, it got a rich history there. So on Friday night, we had a keynote speaker at the conference called Helen Fry, and she was a military intelligence expert, and her talk was just absolutely amazing. And she took us on a little tour, didn't she, outside, and
Yeah, they
that.
had kept German officers there as POWs during the war. And rather than kind of interrogate him and put him through the ringer, they wined and dined him and made him feel special. And the Germans were like, oh, these silly Americans, silly English people, they don't know how to interrogate anybody. And then their lips would start running, and the whole place was bugged. And so, the British intelligence officials got all this invaluable information by basically tricking the Germans into not realizing they knew what they were doing. It was fascinating.
It was brilliant, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely amazing, yeah. And yeah, and of course, the conference itself, you took part in that obviously with your talks, and you did your Spotsylvania one was absolutely amazing. Well, they were both amazing. Of course, you had Frank there as well, and we had the home speakers. But you did a talk for the first time, didn't you? You did the North Anna River
So,
campaign.
yeah, and I've spoken about the North Anna River before, but kind of talking about all the missed opportunities and the ramifications of those missed opportunities was kind of a new approach for me based on an essay I did in our What If book, Great What Ifs of the American Civil War. So that was kind of fun to do. But I got to really give it to you and your colleagues with the roundtable there, and in that. The environment, the intellectual environment of the place was just electric because people really knew their stuff and they were committed to it and highly knowledgeable. And you find that at roundtables where you got a few people who are sort of casually interested, and then there's others who've got greater levels of interest. But like I felt like everybody there at the conference was highly knowledgeable, highly engaged. They really were interested in talking things through and having discussion to learn more. And I've told people it was as rich an intellectual environment as I have been in a long time because it was just so dynamic. So
It
kudos to you and your colleagues for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and you actually you and Frank finished the conference off really well. You chucked him a question at the end, and Frank's answer was I think it had everyone a little bit emotional with what he came out with. I can't remember exactly what he said now, but wow.
Yeah. I asked him, like, what does this all mean for you today?
Yeah,
Frank and I have known each other a long, long time. It's funny, we just live a couple miles apart here in Fredericksburg. We go all the way across the ocean to hang out for the weekend, and I've heard him talk very eloquently about the meaning of the war and the meaning of studying the war. So I basically just lobbed him a softball and let him swing for the fences, and I knew, like Babe Ruth stepping up to the ball
oh,
plate,
he just
calling
smashed
it
it
home
out of the
run, and there he went. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. But yeah, so yeah, and then we finished we had half a day left, didn't we? So we went to Windsor Castle, and again, I've been there a few times, but every time I go in there, I'm just like, oh my goodness me, there's so much in there. You
Yeah,
just
yeah.
can't get your head round it, to be honest. It's mind blowing, isn't it?
if there was one disappointment of the whole trip, it's that the chapel was
Was
closed where
closed. Yeah,
was buried.
yeah,
And that's a small disappointment compared to everything else. Windsor Castle was, I'm so glad we went because, as you told me, like this place is designed for shock and awe. And, when a dignitary comes in, the effect is supposed to be boom, we're not messing around. And
yeah,
it was just amazing to walk in there
mhm,
and, it really was everything that you would imagine an old English castle to be and more.
yeah,
It was just beautiful, amazing, just incredible. And probably the thing that was most overwhelming, we went into the room there where they had all these different treasures from Victoria's Jubilee.
oh wow, that was
And
very,
just from all around the world, people had sent her gifts, and they had so many of them on display, and they rotate them, and it was just wow.
yeah, it was. Yeah, and we had a great. There was a lady in there, if I remember rightly. We kept bumping into her in another room, didn't we? All she wanted to do, bless her heart, was talk about history, and she saw us coming, didn't she? Like not in a nasty way, but like that we, are interested, and she was great as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
that was fantastic.
Great docents there.
Yeah,
So it was,
and
the changing of the guard. We got to see
yeah,
the soldier with the bearskin hat, and again, very British sort of thing to see, and that was really neat. So
yeah.
it was it was a great trip. And then of course we had to cap it off with yet one more visit to a pub to
Oh, of course we did. Yeah.
have a final drink. And
Yeah, that was it. And yeah, no, all I'm going to say is, there's a few things. Again, it's hard to choose what was my favourite part of it. I think the whole thing was my favourite part, to be honest. Um, I've had time to sit and think about it now, but I still can't choose, because it was all good, the whole thing, including the conference, But we had good company, very good music, because Chris, you've got a very good taste in music.
as do you.
Thank
So
you. We
uh,
had some fantastic music in the car, and the main important things we had a lot of laughs as well. So we
we
was always
did.
joking around and having a laugh. So that made it easier as well.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, really, that's what brought the whole trip to life, was having you be able to offer commentary and kind of your thoughts just as a general British citizen, but also, you've got a background in UK history, and so you're able to really explain a lot of this stuff and how it related. So it was just wonderful context for the whole trip.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything you want to add before we finish up here, mate?
Aside from these big things that we've talked about, there, I really love all the little moments we had too, where like, oh, there's a picture of George III. Let's take a selfie with him, and just like, hey, like, here's the guy who helped us win the American Revolution. It's King George, yeah. And like there were just so many of those small moments through the whole thing, like, look, here's Charles II staring down across the street,
Yeah,
looking
from Cromwell.
at
Yeah,
Oliver Cromwell, and they're, forever in a staring match, and so they're just like all these great little moments that, I would encourage people, if you go there and explore and you've got your agenda laid out, follow that, but be open to all these little spontaneous things that will
yeah.
happen to you along the way, because it just will enliven the trip so much more.
And again, for me, you was really, really easy to travel around with as well because you just are very easygoing. So that was, the impression I got anyway. It's just easy. You know, we literally it was such a pleasure. Honestly, it really was. So I just thank you, for coming over and learning a bit of UK history and hoping it's given you, the thirst for more.
For sure, for sure, for sure. And if our listeners here haven't figured it out already, Daz and I have like this mutual admiration society, man crush on each other. It was so much fun to do all this with him. He was having fun doing it with me, and I can't wait for like the 2024 tour, or whatever the next one
Yeah,
turns out
yeah,
to
of course,
be. Good
100%.
time.
It's going to happen. But anyway, mate, all that's left to say is cheers.
Cheers.